Welcome to Liberty Talk. I'm Odessa Orlowitz. I've had quite a few people over the years ask me to look into targeted individuals. And I've seen stuff about it on Twitter, and I finally got around to spending about 3 days researching what a targeted individual is. And I put together a show where there's two main whistleblowers, Brian Cofron and Dr. Duncan. And I looked at interviews they've done, and then I found other scientists and industry specialists that have nothing to do with them also talking about this technology and what the end goal is of this technology. And Dr. Duncan has worked for DARPA and the CIA. And you're going to see, I'm going to let you see, he was in charge of designing a lot of this tech for wartime against adversaries when they want to get information from them, etc. But unfortunately, he started to see that it was being used on the American people. Now, he's American, so he's talking about America the whole time. I had about 4 hours of footage that I had to whittle down, and he talked about how worldwide he believes there's about 1 million people that are actually targeted individuals right now that they need to do testing on so that they can start doing what they need to do to bring in this agenda of having everybody hooked up to the internet. We know that they're not denying that this will be a possibility soon, and that nobody would offer to be a guinea pig of this technology, but they can't roll it out America-wide or worldwide without guinea pigs. It's impossible. So what they've been doing is targeting people who don't have a lot of friends, who don't have a lot of people they can lean on, and testing on their brain this new technology, which they do from far away. And you can be the judge after you watch this show. Now, there's a lot of mind control that they're showing, that they're experimenting on people right now. But it's interesting the way they break down these poor individuals who nobody knows what's wrong with them, who are hearing voices. Now, Dr. Duncan interviewed about 2,500 people, and because he was with the CIA and DARPA, and he understands something called CIA scripts, he can distinguish if someone's just unfortunately mentally ill or does have schizophrenia. Those exist. But he talked about how he can tell if this person's actually just a targeted individual. A lot of them are high functioning and they were never schizophrenic before. Anyways, he can tell the difference between someone who's schizophrenic and someone who's a targeted individual. There's no denying that this technology exists. They're not denying it. But what they're not telling anyone is that right now they are testing out this technology on individuals around the world and America and not letting them know that they're targeted individuals. And so what's happening in their brains and their minds and these weird instructions they're hearing and voices are actually coming from the CIA. But they keep us in fear about war so that we can constantly socially sort of approve, or at least half the population, of a lot of our funds, our taxpayer money, going to military operations. Well, a massive chunk of it is actually going to this, the new way that they're doing war against humanity, which is being able to just control us. They're breaking down the ego. Well, they're doing this with the mind control of the targeted individuals. And you can laugh at this, but you really should watch this episode. This is real. And I should have covered it a long time ago, but I didn't know that even my audience would be ready for it. Now, if you're the kind of person that's already paranoid, or I know mental illness is a problem with, a certain portion of society now, if you are dealing with any kind of schizophrenia, I wouldn't actually recommend that you watch this episode, because you don't want to start telling yourself things that could be wrong and make it worse. This is for people that have a clear head. They know they're not schizophrenic. They know they don't suffer from delusion. This is for people that just see what's happening to about 1 million people worldwide. And so if you think about that, what is there, 8 billion people? So the chances of you being one of these people is very slim. But this is a reality. And when I was looking just before I was going to shoot this, I just found out that Dr. Duncan is dead now. I didn't even know that while I was putting this together. There was some weird thing where all of a sudden he was just pronounced dead by somebody, and they're saying his Facebook has gone inactive, but some people weren't even sure if his Facebook was really him in the last little while because he was acting weird. So this is new. I believe it was in the summer that the first video came out that he's passed away. Nobody knows what happened to him. So all of these videos of him whistleblowing what's going on were shot before this. Now, he did say he did have his life threatened by a group once. He talks about which group that was. So let's just get into this. Let me know what you think. Now, I put together a lot of different videos. I clipped them together. Some of the videos I clipped together, already another person had clipped together the clips. So if you hear music in the background, I didn't do that. But I clipped in a whole bunch of videos where some were shorter clips, some were complete separate 3-hour interviews. So you're going to see a lot of different clips to back up what this person's saying by what another person's saying by another scientist on stage, so that you know that this isn't just a bunch of BS. It's really important that we know that this is going on so we can all wake up to the fact that they have no problem experimenting on us. And before I forget, I stumbled upon Policy Horizons Report Canada. I first disclosed that. I was actually the first one in Canada to disclose the Policy Horizons Report 3 to 4 years ago, and then a bunch of other people did after. And there's another new report, 2024, and they say they're going to do an expansion of geoengineering, probably. They just admit it. You're going to see me put clips in about geoengineering. You'll figure out why afterwards. It's all intertwined. But if you want to ignore the geoengineering clips, go ahead. The rest of it's very interesting. We're going to get into smart dust as well. I hope that you can share this video so that people understand what's truly going on. And this technology is almost ready. Quick message from my sponsor, and I'll get right into it. Did you know if the banks do a bail-in, they can take the contents in your bank vault? But storing your gold and silver at home could be a huge security risk. Every day, our dollar is worth less and less. Inflation is stealing the only savings families have. Now more than ever, it's so important to hedge the savings you've worked so hard for. Banks have been failing all over the world, and social credit has all but arrived. But did you know you can do wholesale price vaulting and retail delivery from the most prestigious, reliable company in Canada? Did you also know if you decide to leave Canada, your gold and silver can be sent right to you after you arrive to your destination? The only company I personally use and trust are those awake guys at New World Precious Metals. Take control of your family's future. You can just click the link in my show description or type in the web address libertytalkcanada.ca/gold to get on their mailing list, attend their webinar, or book an appointment. Let them know Odessa sent you. All right, let's get into it. Some of the videos I sped up just a tiny bit to keep the pacing up so that we could get through the plethora of information. And I could have put in 8 hours more of information, but I had to keep skimming it down just so that people could actually understand the point of why I'm showing you all this. So some of the audio I sped up just to make it go a little bit quicker when the speech was a bit slower.
Background, but I consider myself one of the last Renaissance scientists, last Renaissance man. I went to a private school in Connecticut.
And this will get louder in a second. This is the audio of when they first started interviewing this man, Dr. Duncan. And it does get louder in a second. The person on site turned it up, so just bear with them.
And then on to Harvard on the East Coast, where I was early accepted. They allowed me to graduate in 3 years. I declined, not Harvard, but to graduate early because there's so many great classes to still take, and my parents were paying for it. So. I worked at an artificial intelligence company. I forgot to mention my undergrad focus was pre-medical and computer science. So after that, I worked for an artificial intelligence company that did image recognition of all types. And I went back to school for a master's in biomechanical engineering, robotic engineering, like artificial hearts and those types of engineering. majors, went back for more schooling, get a PhD in artificial intelligence, but a very specific field, which is genetic algorithm optimization of artificial neural networks. So what that means is we were creating alien synthetic minds, emerging minds. And when I say alien, it's not from another planet. We're just creating cybernetic minds. And there's a Dr. Wiener, and I think it was about 100 years ago when the CIA was created, that coined the term cybernetics, which means there is no distinction between a synthetic symbolic representation of intelligence or a biological one. In fact, they meet. You can have brain chips if you want, and it will all give rise to consciousness.
The military, you know, they pioneered the internet, DARPA, and now they are pioneering our interface to our brain.
For that, we really need to measure every neuron and at appropriate speeds and long periods of time. And that's what the BRAIN Initiative is about.
They asked us to go and measure the activity in a living brain and map exhaustively the wiring diagram of every neuron connecting to every other neuron.
And we're, as part of the BRAIN Initiative, thinking about the Rosetta brain, where we're not picking one particular winning technology. We're trying to stimulate new innovative technologies and to integrate them all into one brain and do that over and over again in different brains, in different pathological settings in humans.
And then from there, IARPA wants us to deliver the brain up to the cloud.
So I showed you the Policy Horizons report cover for 2024, and they always have things like the internet floating around, like nano dust floating around, and it's disruptions. And it's all about how Canadians will become part of the Internet of Things. You guys know that, who've been following my show, and I'll read you their latest report next episode. And this, the reason why I put this in here is because we're going to get to smart dust, but here it is, what I told you they said. This is from the 2024 Canadian Policy Horizons report on the Canadian government website. Geoengineering takes off. So what they're seeing is that soon geoengineering will take off. And they're saying it's all to fight climate change and removing carbon and reflecting sunlight away from the earth, because that's what Bill Gates wants. So anybody saying it's not happening, they're admitting it right here in the 2024 report, but they're just pretending that they're just starting it, you guys. They haven't been doing it yet. All that crisscrossing in the sky, that's, you know, not just the airplanes, but I'm from the 1980s as a kid. There was not these crisscrossing in the sky where then it all pans out and now it's just a cloudy day for the rest of the day. We all know, anyone that's my age, that this has gotten worse and worse and worse and worse every summer and throughout the year. We also know through their own weather warfare and weather modification on the Canadian government website and all the other countries' websites, they can change the weather. Why aren't they putting out forest fires? Because how can they do the climate change agenda if they're not having forest fires? You guys already know this. Let's continue with what we're actually supposed to be looking at today.
So this is a 40 gigabit per second brocade switch to the Internet 2 infrastructure. So this is like the fast internet, and we upload that brain to the cloud. And
here's a laundry list of the types of bytes that we need to store this information. If you're interested in brain uploading and downloading, these are the kind of absolute minimum numbers that you need to be considering, but it's not out of range. It's not necessarily far off in the future.
And if you think the internet is big, if you think blockchain is big, this is going to blow it all away, because there's nothing bigger than connecting our minds to the internet.
I find it interesting that that's what's going on. That's what they're admitting. They're saying, hey, this Microns project is going straight to the source. We're not taking it from the global internet perspective. We're taking it from the brain itself. And eventually, those two things will merge. So the public announcement of a project like this is pretty telling about where we are.
It's so funny because the military contacted me and asked if I would help them. And I'm reluctant to do that because I like talking about everything. And it would be top secret, whatever they told me. So it's like, I don't know. I have a lot of ideas but I don't want to know what you're doing because I only want to know it's public. So this is public.
Okay, so Smart Dust is a military creation and strategy, and Dr. Duncan has told us that all these things that he thought was going to be to fight the enemy is now being used on us. So it was developed in the 1990s by Dr. Chris Pister, a professor of electrical engineering at the University of California, Berkeley, as a simple way to use smart wireless sensors. Back then, Pister envisioned a world where ubiquitous sensors could measure anything that could be measured. Now, you're going to see in this show that even these scientists talk about it, and the whistleblowers are saying they're doing horrible things to experiment on all of us right now. Well, not the targeted individual. I mean, I'm not a targeted individual. Most of us are not targeted individuals. But how are they targeting these individuals? Well, they're making the environment so that they can. So God bless that most of us are not targeted individuals right now yet. So anyways, I'll get back to this. Unsurprisingly, the military provided the impetus, funding, and development. Smart Dust as a weapon is what attracted the military. In 92, DARPA funded Pister's research as part of their Smart Dust project. Then in 2001, the US military carried out a surveillance test with these devices during combat in Afghanistan. After calculating the speed and direction of 142 military vehicles, the test was declared a great success. Smart Dust can be sprayed from the air. Applied with paint, the enemy will not be able to know that all his movements are controlled. Experts expect that in the coming years, the development of reconnaissance smart dust will be fully completed. And this was written quite a while ago. Let's go on to the next one. It's already all around us. The power and danger of nanotechnology in general, and smart dust in particular, is well understood by any person. Therefore, each next step along the path of nanotech development raises a lot of questions and protests. The society should be prepared for the introduction of nanotech in terms of infrastructure and even psychologically. Policy Horizons report. I've done numerous things with experts on nanotech who are saying they are already putting it in food, our air. It's being rained down on us. It's in everything. It's in everything. So it's dual use. And you'll hear Dr. Duncan talk about, to get funding, people have to have dual use. Dual use, it can be used for light or dark. And it's being used for dark as well as light right now. I mean, they actually have their reasoning for this. They want to bring everybody down to being equal. The unfortunate thing is, it's not so everyone can be equal. It's so that the people at the top can become even more rich and they can just mind control us what to do. We see how they're already doing it on the news. Well, this is going to make it a lot easier. You don't believe it? Watch the rest of this show. So the most serious concern is the ethical aspect of the use of nanotech. Smart dust provides great opportunities for manipulating people for total control over a person, for persecuting opposition-minded citizens, political opponents, and human rights activists. There is no guarantee that criminals will not use this tech for crimes never seen before. You can continue to read this if you like. You can just pause it here. I'm going to keep going. And brain monitoring. You're going to hear all about brain monitoring in this episode. So this is patents for weather modification. And anyone that says that it's not happening, there's patents. And you can see from the next slide how they've changed some airplanes to do this. And they're saying, oh, it's to fight fires. Well, this particular company in America never did fight fires with it, but they're still up there doing these things. So you can take a look at this, freeze it here if you want to look at it. This is a pimped out plane to do this. Geoengineering. And you can go to, I'm sure you guys have already looked, but for any new viewers of mine, you can go to Dane Wethington's geoengineeringwatch.org to see. He's an environmentalist, and he's actually been trying to talk to Kennedy about this.
To do that because I like talking about everything. And it would be top secret, whatever they told me. So it's like, I don't know. I have a lot of ideas, but I don't want to know what you're doing because I only want to know it's public. So this is public, and the different applications for it on the battlefield are not public. There are new technologies, and a lot of them are being developed by startups and the military that are going to allow us to much more accurately measure and actually communicate with your brain. Now, the nice thing about this technology is it's non-invasive, meaning they don't have to crack open your skull and put a chip inside.
The true way that this technology works is that a complete DNA profile is obtained from the target, from the individual, the targeted.
So this is Brian Kofron, and he is an industry specialist, and he realized, I think he worked out of Seattle, what they were doing, and he had a huge ethical problem with it. He started speaking out. So this isn't him. This is somebody who's obviously just put, a picture of someone in a screen. But Brian's on the phone talking, and he's done interviews before talking about how he can't believe they're doing this to our own citizens. Oh, and also, don't forget I had James Scott on, and we did about 8 hours of going through and trying to show what the Policy Horizons report said from a couple of years ago, the Canadian report, and they admitted that they will be putting sensors on everything for nature so they can really watch nature and how it's working. And there was a picture, if you didn't see that episode, we show in their own diagrams of a plane dropping what looks like dust, what looks like what we're seeing up there with the strip striping.
And then this information, the DNA of the individual, is used to determine the resonant frequency of the DNA itself. The resonant frequency is then used to fine-tune the technology, the radio frequency signals, the microwave auditory effect, and all of the other aspects of the technology to tune it perfectly to the resonant frequency of the targeted individual's DNA.
And the reason I'm showing you this is because we're going to go back to Dr. Duncan in this show and show what he's saying matches exactly what this other random person out of Seattle is saying that they're doing, which matches a bunch of people on stage and scientists telling you this technology is ready.
And they can read your thoughts verbatim as they occur within your own mind.
We can generate an electronic signal that's characteristic for the DNA. This can read DNA from solution, and your blood is a solution, it's a liquid. We can decode it into a form that can be read by a computer. And in a way, you can think about DNA as digital information moving through a tube. Now, if we can tap into that tube, like a network, and we can read that information, we can intercept what's happening in people, you can make them an extension of the internet. And I have a thermostat at home that's on my iPad. I can warm the house up before I get home. People call that the Internet of Things. We call this the Internet of Living Things.
Much like any information, biometric information, digital information can be susceptible. We know that genetic information and DNA sequencing information is highly sought after by adversaries.
They know that transhumanism can't be stopped at this point, but they want to take the safest route. So a lot of these experiments are unfortunately sacrifices that will help the future generations. And that's kind of their internal marketing ploy of why they must do it.
George Clooney said about the COVID vax, well, once somebody was interviewing him saying, you were promoting it before, and now we're seeing, there has been some unfortunate events surrounding that. He didn't deny it. And he said, well, with science, there's always people that are going to be sacrificed, and he was like, I could have been one of them because he took it. This is just the way they feel. This is the way of the future. People are going to be sacrificed, but we're going to lie to you right before we do it so that everybody takes it. This show is not about the vaccines, but you guys all know there's more than just a few other ways that they're getting this stuff inside of us.
And there's a race between, the three major countries. who's going to have the best AI, whose culture is going to survive, whose money is going to dominate, whose language is going to dominate. And so this is very competitive field in the military right now. Who can collect the most minds the fastest, build the the biggest hive mind network.
The memo says the kits could expose personal and genetic information, could be used to conduct mass surveillance or to track individuals.
There are many military applications for maintaining and using DNA data sets. There are new technologies that are coming out.
Technology called biocoded directed energy. And that's a top secret thing that was developed. And what it is they get your DNA. Once they have your DNA, they take the DNA and they put your DNA code in a supercomputer. And in that supercomputer, they run algorithms that biocode electromagnetic transmissions so they bioresonate with your body. Once they've done that, they can transmit that from satellites or cell towers or aircraft or any number of ways.
Interesting how the 5G towers went up so quick during the lockdowns. Aren't they fabulous?
And that signal will only affect you and nobody else. In other words, everybody standing next to you is not going to hear the content because their receiver is not tuned to that bioresonance.
There's a bioresonance to every individual, just like our fingerprint. Every person has an individual DNA, a different bioresonance. And so the original Stockland patent is on my website, where Stockland was able to go voice to skull with pulse transmissions in 92. And then after the rest of the development went black ops. We don't really know what happened after that.
When we started Palantir, we were unpopular when we financed in Silicon Valley. We were unpopular when we built Palantir in Silicon Valley, and we're still highly controversial and unpopular in Silicon Valley because we have a very differentiated view than our colleagues in Silicon Valley.
So what is it that makes Palantir so different? Sam Biddle is a reporter with The Intercept who has covered Palantir for years.
I think one of the bigger misconceptions about Palantir is that it has the same aspirations as Facebook or other companies that it's lumped in with because of its geography. I think Palantir really is able to thrive in part because it can pass itself off as just another tech company.
Because Palantir isn't just another tech company. Just listen to this interview that Alex Karp did with Axios, who asked him about Palantir's contract with ICE.
And I see this question in every single thing we do. And by the way, not just in ICE, I see this with our work with clandestine services. I mean, our product is used on occasion to kill people.
This is drone targeting, or what is this?
Targeting of all kinds.
Targeting of all kinds. They're admitting it.
Executive being willing to say something like that so casually in an interview. I mean, that's the kind of quote that if it came in on a hot mic from someone at Google would be a huge scandal. From Palantir, it's just a part of an interview.
What Thiel and Palantir set out to do was efficiently organize the U.S. intelligence agency's data.
Well, we built Palantir starting in 2004 to supply the U.S. intelligence community with world-class software platforms.
From its beginning, Palantir has been closely linked to the U.S. government. One of its early funders actually was the CIA's venture capital wing.
We knew we could put voices in group people's heads. What they did, and I know from the Russian translation, from Cheryl Welsh, from reading all her translated psychotronic stuff from Russia, that they figured out how to biocode these microwaves so that it can attack specific individuals.
So the war machine will almost always use it first for their advantage and keep it as secret as possible. It's a great interrogation tool. Imagine having bloodless wars where you just...
And if you just tuned in, this is Dr. Duncan, who worked for DARPA, worked for CIA, and then realized that his own technology was now being used on the American people, not adversaries. And he's been a whistleblower ever since. And he all of a sudden has died this past summer. Nobody knows how or why. He's gone.
Fatigue your enemy, and they drop to their knees. We use the voice to skull and LDAR long-range acoustic device in the Gulf War to say this is all lay down your arms, and they believed it.
So what is that? Can you explain exactly what that is? The LRAD?
LRAD is a sonic long-range acoustic weapon. The V2K is a microwave weapon. You can't plug your eardrums. You can't stop the sound.
It conducts straight to your brain.
Yeah, and it makes it sound like it's coming, the sound or voice or music or whatever you want to play is coming right from the center of your head. So it works pretty well in war, and you can imagine other effects. You're getting brutalized, beaten up, all virtual. And the brain damage, unfortunately, they're going to have to work on that. But otherwise, you can literally traumatize an entire population. Okay, so are those good effects rather than guns? Perhaps. But there are other good effects. Imagine once the civilians have use of this, like Elon Musk's Neuralaser, you can have more control of yourself. I feel like I want to be happy today, or I want to have a communication with you without using a phone. So synthetic telepathy is really around the corner, but we have to get the messaging infrastructure working.
What are your thoughts on Elon Musk's Neuralink? What is your outlook on that?
I think he's going to be set up as a patsy for a lot of this experimentation that's going on in the public. I've already seen it happening. Targeted individuals are very angry. They want to point the finger at somebody. He's the perfect person to point the finger at. He's a rich man, so he's already suspect in some people's minds.
So targeted individuals will hear a clicking and then instruction telling them what to do. And it gets abusive if you're not doing it. So they'll break you down and say horrible things like your family hates you, they want to murder you, or he talks about how if there's a certain sort of like politician they want gone, they will target individuals so that this person thinks that that politician's voice is in their head, driving them crazy to the point where these people want to pull out a gun and kill that particular politician. And so that's why he also mentions later that guns, he said, if they want to disarm a country, they can mind control people already to go do mass shootings so that everyone agrees to give up their guns. Because the agenda for North America is to disarm us. So some of them, it's just people that are crazy. We know that. But he talks about it later. If they have a certain agenda they need to accomplish, they can get somebody to just go do it with mind control. They're already testing it out on people. And they usually use people that are loners, weird, who you would assume might end up being a school shooter because they're picked on, they're lonely, maybe they're on drugs. Anyway, he talks about who they target.
Even though this technology is very old, very old.
What the Neuralink technology?
Yeah, yeah.
Really? How old is it?
I can track back at least synthetic telepathy or piping voices into people's head right around Kennedy's assassination, but about 1958 was the earliest target I could find. It really seemed to come online with a bunch of people in about 1976, the bicentennial of this nation. And there seems to be increases in the number of people that have these complaints given bigger military budgets. Now, why there's a correlation there, I don't know. You'll have to make your own speculation. But this isn't new. Havana Syndrome is not new by any means. It has a new name. It's getting recognition by the news. But honestly, it's been squelched. It's been covered up for many, many decades.
Do you know if Elon has any sort of government contracts with Neuralink?
No, as far as I know, he does not. He'll be approached, obviously, but what I think they're doing, like some of the projects I worked on.
So if you didn't catch that because I interrupted it, so sorry about that. What he's saying is Elon thinks he's discovering all this technology and developing it. But no, he's like, Neuralink tech has been around for a long time. And he later, I think it's later that he says he's happy that Elon is starting to develop it because then people will start to realize how this technology needs to be controlled. And Elon has done interviews saying this technology has to be controlled. We can't just put it out and, not have, he's talking about AI, etc., not have strict rules around it. Well, what he's saying, because later they said, do you think Elon's working for the government? And this guy said, no, not yet. He's probably had offers. So he's saying they don't want people to know that this tech has been around for a long time. And so Elon's privately developing it, but the government's been using it against well, the CIA, I mean, he was saying presidents don't even know this is going on because it's the top of DARPA and military that are doing this. We know that the presidents are not actually in charge right now. They come and go every 4 years. And he talks later about how there is a shadow government and they are more powerful than the sort of front government, you know, where we vote for certain things. I mean, it's important to go out and vote as well because we can stall agendas like forcing V's on everybody and stuff, meaning the vaccines. But these military operations, a lot of people are finding out about them. I don't know what we're going to do about it, but it's important that we all understand what's going on. Like, truth has to be brought to light first. And we know that's the first step.
In my time at DARPA, became real big companies like Google and Facebook and et cetera. So I think it's a technology transfer. They can help civilian scientists, you know, come up with the ideas to make it look like it's new. And not the other way around, that the universities came up with it and then they bought it from them. So I think, I hope Elon actually succeeds, because then this isn't imaginary stuff anymore. People will then see, wow, we can really connect brains together and make hyper intelligence. I sent you that article from Duke University, a video of how they put brain chips, and you don't need brain chips, but that's one way, one technology, into 3 monkeys, connected their cerebral cortex. And in this experiment, they could prove that 3 monkey brains together acted intuitively as one brain and was able to solve a problem that the individual monkeys were not able to solve. And that's a really important finding. Now, can we extend that to an entire population and help solve the world's problems? We can't even fathom what a larger mind would look like. It's certainly not human.
Wasn't there another experiment done where they connected like a human and a human brain and a monkey's brain?
There was. How do you know about that one?
I heard about it. I don't remember where I heard about that. I was a girl.
Yes, and an ape in the army experiment.
I might have heard you talk about it.
Well, maybe. And it didn't end well. What they were trying to do is cybernetically link. They weren't able to break down the ego of the ape or the girl per se, the ego.
Ego, okay.
So sense of self. We all have a sense of self.
Right.
So what happened is when they put the girl in the cage, the ape tore her apart. It wasn't able to recognize her as an extension of itself. And I believe this is part of the reason of the breakdown, the torture that TIs are experiencing, is they have to break down the ego in order to be part of a greater mind or mind controlled.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, it is. A worldwide global brain.
They basically analyze your DNA and they then use supercomputers to encode the signals.
And you basically convert DNA information into ionic information into computer information. So that's going from DNA to ions, but for the brain, we're interested in the opposite, going from ions to DNA. We have the ion channels that are going through the spiking, or in some cases, the non-spiking behavior. It's influencing the fidelity of the DNA polymerase so that the time series of the calcium, say, turns into a spatial series of changes in the DNA sequence, which you can then read out or compute on. And not just for the RNAs and other molecular identifiers, but what the brain was thinking during activity.
All of us speak to ourselves in our head. That's how it's strange that we have to communicate to ourselves by speaking, right? But we will just sit there talking to ourselves. So as we are talking, there's a certain pattern for every word we say. What they're doing is looking at the pattern in the brain, and then they're matching that pattern, they're putting that into a database. So if you can match the patterns in somebody's brain to the patterns in the database, you can literally start to read their mind.
So I grabbed this image. Laws are being set up slowly so that when this happens in the next 50 years or whatever, that you can actually be put on house arrest and tracked or put in jail for thinking about going and doing a crime. This is what some of Trudeau's new bills and laws are. Now, we know it's also because they don't want people going and burning down churches or synagogues or doing hate speech that's super atrocious hate speech. They don't want that, and they want to protect people from that kind of thing. I'm not saying if it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's what they're doing. But they literally are setting up bills so that you cannot even think these things without someone showing up at your door. Now, that's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen next year, but it's getting set up for all of that.
Now, that's just the beginning. Without verbalizing anything, you could literally start to communicate with other people. So my lecture, we could all be standing here silently. And I could just be communicating it to you. I could be talking, you would talk to people. You could literally have conversations with people without ever getting on your phone anywhere in the world. Goodbye WeChat or Google Hangouts. We could all just be on our brainwaves, right? Communicating with our friends. They could be dropping in on us. Very strange if we think about it.
So that when that person goes to speak out about it, when they go to seek help from their fellow human beings, and their fellow human beings say, what is it that's happening to you? The target will then say, I'm hearing voices inside my head.
But these would be controlled hallucinations run by algorithms.
And they will conclude that this person must be crazy. And as a result, they will recommend psychological evaluation for that person. You can see the way this is going to go and the way it is going right now. As good people, helpless people that are being abused and tortured and enslaved and experimented upon in America today, all of the symptoms are induced by a technology that is so fucking sophisticated, it is horrifying beyond description. And this technology at that point will be used by automated supercomputer software programming that will manipulate the emotions and the behavior, the thoughts of every.
Again, this is Brian Kofron, another whistleblower out of Seattle. I don't know if he's still in Seattle, but who realized the horrificness of what they were actually doing. And he's become another whistleblower.
In the United States of America. And I'm here to tell you that it's already here. There isn't going to come a day where there's troops in the streets and tanks rolling down your neighborhood and riot gear and all this stuff. We might have isolated incidents like that. It might get like that every once in a while, but the true control grid is this technology, voice-to-skull, hive mind, behavior manipulation technology, and it can all be done remotely. It can be done simply by targeting you with a frequency, locking into the resonant frequency of your DNA and your mind, and in that manner completely track and trace.
If you're hearing the cell phone interference, they put that in this show. That's not my cell phone interference, but they're showing, when your phone is about to ring, or you have an email coming in and then your computer makes that noise. We've all heard it. That's the interference. We all already know that, but that's not from my phone here. That's what they put into this video.
And control you 24 hours a day.
They call this the New World Order, which ironically is the same name Hitler used.
That's the Canadian Minister of Defense. And he has a lot to say about what he discovered when he was the Canadian Minister of Defense. I don't mean to keep interrupting. I want to let you know who these people are and why I put it in.
Used for the smaller empire he imagined. One sure thing, the New World Order will end all pretense of government of, by, and for the people. It will be a dictatorship of, by, and for a small minority of the rich and privileged elite. Most of my friends, both American and Canadian, tend to agree that the world is in a state of crisis. But very few are aware that the problems are not natural phenomena. They have been engineered by a very tiny elite group of rich, ruthless, and power-hungry people who have been deliberately keeping the majority of decent, hard-working taxpayers totally in the dark.
The so-called black budget has never been shown to the public until now.
Since 1996, the Pentagon has spent $8.5 trillion in taxpayer money that has never been accounted for.
Every year, hundreds of billions of Pentagon dollars go missing, not because of fraud, waste, or abuse, but because U.S. military planners have appropriated it to secretly develop advanced weapons and fund clandestine operations.
A shadowy government with its own Air Force.
And in Canada, remember, Freeland just can't find $5 billion. Not sure where it went. Oh, and now, whoops, they can't find, God, millions of dollars that was supposed to be sent on helping Canada with COVID. That seems to have disappeared as well. Everything is a big money laundering operation to use for all these black ops and fear porn of world wars. Not that they might not happen, and they're already starting to in the Middle East, as we know, but if they keep fear porning us about viruses, fear porning us about wars, we'll just keep saying, yes, take all our tax money into completely reshaping what humanity is, but we'll just say it's for military protection.
His own Navy, his own fundraising mechanism, and the ability to pursue his own ideas of the national interest, free from all checks and balances, and free from the law itself. And
if you still don't believe, go to the Dimming, geoengineeringwatch.org. He's an environmentalist, and he isn't just going and scraping off what ends up all over our food and our grass and our animals and ourselves and our children. He's started to test what's in the sky, what's coming out of these airplanes. And yes, some of them are contrails, but a lot of them aren't. And we don't see it every day. Don't you find it really weird that some days or some weeks there's just nothing? You don't see anything. And then other days, all of a sudden there's 40,000 planes coming through? I mean, I don't need to, I'm singing to the choir.
Senator Daniel Inouye is speaking about the Unacknowledged Special Access Programs, or USAPs, an entity that uses taxpayer dollars, but is not beholden to domestic laws. Unacknowledged Special Access Programs are not to be confused with special access programs that are acknowledged. Edward Snowden, for instance, disclosed, among other things, a program called PRISM, but PRISM was acknowledged, meaning the President, Congress, and key members of the intelligence community knew of its existence. USAPs, on the other hand, are small, top-secret compartments whose very existence is not known by anyone outside the compartment. A Department of Defense manual describes USAP as follows, quote, unacknowledged SAPs require a significantly greater degree of protection than acknowledged SAPs. A SAP with protective controls that ensures the existence of the program is not acknowledged, affirmed, or made known to any person not authorized for such information. All aspects, technical, operational, logistical, are handled in an unacknowledged manner, end quote. This means that no matter who it is, high-ranking official or otherwise, if one were to ask about such a program, one is authorized and required to deny its existence entirely.
It is ironic that the U.S. should be fighting monstrously expensive wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, allegedly to bring democracy to those two countries, when it itself can no longer legitimately claim to be called a democracy, when trillions, and I mean thousands of billions of dollars have been spent on projects about which both the Congress and the Commander-in-Chief have been kept deliberately in the dark.
And what kind of operations would require such monumental secrecy?
So if you go all the way back to Norwood Wiener, the goal of creating artificial intelligence was for them to become gods, to create an all-seeing eye. And the cybernetics group that basically dictated the direction for this project was intertwined with the CIA. And what's interesting is out of the cybernetics group came two fundamental projects. So one was the creation of a personal computer, and the other one was MKUltra. Their goal is to create this global computer that sees all, sees everything, and where the humans evolved to create a collective mind.
This technology can also tap into the optical nerve of the target and the auditory system of the target, so that those monitoring the target can see what the target is seeing and hear what the target is hearing.
Do you remember when I had Aman Jabi on my show? He's another American whistleblower, and he was talking about your optic. They're going right through the eye right now. And he thinks they're doing it already through our computers. They're manning whoever they want to man and testing it out on us through our computers.
This information is then downloaded and stored on a computer in a highly secure, classified site on servers that are guarded by some of the tightest security in the world.
So the ability to do this, the ability to download information, that is like what the military and other people are that's their holy grail.
There's a number of companies now that are looking at ways to write digital information into DNA, because you would only need about a room full of DNA to record all of the digital data that exists today, which is quite extraordinary.
So we'll be able to outsource, we'll be able to upload our memories to the cloud. So let's say you don't want to, you want that memory forever, right? You're like, it's automatically probably being stored in the cloud for you without you thinking about it. Just like these automatic backups on your computer, everything, there's a copy and there's redundancy and there's like many versions. And so your experience, you could access it later.
This results in the individual's entire day, everything they see, everything they hear, everything they experience, and everything they feel being recorded till the end of time.
Within the brain, there are tiny structures called microtubules, right? If you think of these as straws, but they're straws through which flows light. And in fact, photons of light known as biophotons. And that each one of these is a package of information that flows around, these tiny structures in the brain. This light is carrying, of course, the memories. And we know DNA is also producing these biophotons of light. This is well studied and is well understood. So the interface between the brain and the DNA would therefore be these biophotons.
Now this is where, if you can transfer knowledge and you can communicate, because your brain is wirelessly connected to the internet, there's no reason you couldn't extract memories, which are just data, out of one brain and put them in another brain. Now, what would it mean to share memories?
Although the connectivity of the brain is where we are processing experiences, even utilizing recalled memories and writing new memories to the hard drive, that it's more like a RAM with a random access memory rather than being the hard drive. The DNA would be effectively our hard drive where all the bulk of the information we're not using is being written to. So it could be that in the future that we'll find a way to download people into DNA and move them across into other bodies. So this is an astonishing step forward in these kind of science fiction type ideas.
When our brains are connected to the internet, our physical bodies become less important. Now, think about that. If our brains are connected to the internet, and if our brains are all connected, all of us connected, I could literally go into your head and see through your eyes.
Because of my responsibilities in surveillance as a otherwise normal security specialist, I was showed this technology at work. And it was through the perspective, of course, of the camera, and what I was told that it was obvious it was being used through the eyes of the targets. So I have seen it, and it is absolutely remarkable. It's just like a first-person, video.
So he's saying the targets, people who did not volunteer for this, that are walking amongst us, are the target that they're testing this stuff on, ruining their lives. They're going to the doctor and the doctor just puts them on meds thinking they're schizophrenic or psychotic or whatever. And they have no idea. And this goes on for years and years. And what they do is, if you're not responding to one stimulus they're giving, because you've learned that you're a targeted individual and you're saying, nope, I'm not listening, I'm not responding to this, they'll turn up the stress and be like, your mother hates you, you're a loser, and awful, awful swearing, and basically abuse you for weeks on end until you're just nothing. You're not even yourself anymore. And then they rebuild you. They've broken down your ego. They rebuild you in the idea of what they want humanity to be. We all know that with cults, COVID was a cult. We all know with cults that they break you down, break you down, break you down, break you down, so that you're not anything you were before, and they rebuild you how they want you to see and view the world. And that's what they're doing to these targeted individuals. and they would like to eventually just rebuild humanity in the vision of what they want for humanity. And so they're sacrificing however many people that they're doing this targeting to. I feel very bad for them.
Game or something where you see right through the eyes of the individual. And so there's two aspects to the technology. Number one, there is the actual, what is essentially receiving the signal from the individual themselves. And that signal, it goes on within the human mind. But basically, those optical signals are interpreted by the brain, and then you perceive them as vision. You perceive them as pictures and so forth. But this is all electrical signals within the brain. And so the exact same thing, the data is taken in through the eyes, and then your brain renders it in a visual form that we know as sight. The exact same thing happens with the computer. The data is sent to the computer, then it is rendered in the form of a picture that people can look at. It's real time. There may be a second or two delay, but it is as it is happening. They can actually see through the eyes of the target. It's done all remotely. And that is rendered, of course, in essentially real time on a computer screen. And then it is to the point where it's so accurate, you can actually see the individual pores on someone's face. You can get total situational awareness.
So there's no need.
What I thought about when I was putting this show together is people who have near-death experience, you know, where they've been dead for 20 minutes or 15 minutes, they've drowned or heart attacks, whatever it was. You know, I watched a lot of near-death experience stuff before COVID, and they say the same thing, which is interesting. When they died for the 20 minutes and some of them saw the tunnel and the light and they were greeted by family members that had passed, or people that they said they knew they were their family, but it wasn't their earth family. They often say, when I left my body in the hospital room, and they could see what the nurses were saying and doing. And when they come back to life, they'll say to the nurse, I saw you freaking out over there and getting a tube. And I saw you guys make a joke about this. You should really look at near-death experience. There's books and YouTube videos of people that have had it. They said that as soon as they left their body, they could see not only what was in the hospital room, but they could see what their brother was doing. And all they had to think about was that. And they could see their husband driving to the hospital. They could see what other things were going on in other rooms. They could see everything at once, all at the same time. And time was different. So it's really interesting that now technology has gotten so strong that they've tapped into, I guess it's consciousness on how to manipulate people, how to do this, how to see exactly what they're doing through their eyes. But yet when we pass away, this is what we see in near death. All of a sudden, everything is different. Blind people can see, they can see every part of their life at once, life reviews.
Once we tap into the brain, our minds itself can actually create overlays of AR and VR. If we have algorithms that stimulate the right things and give it the right data, we could literally see a screen pop up. We call it hallucinating, right? But these would be controlled hallucinations run by algorithms that would give us everything AR would without any glasses, without any contact lenses.
This technology can be used to beam images and even motion pictures into one's brain. Images and motion pictures that are so realistic that you think you're actually watching a movie or seeing something in reality. It's like a virtual reality 3D rendering that takes place within the target's mind.
But as soon as we connect our brains to the internet, emotions are also data. I feel your anxiety, you know?
This technology can also be used to manipulate the emotions of the target. It can induce fear, love, hate. It can cause you to feel any fucking emotion at any time by artificially inducing them.
So, you know, like any technology, there are great things we could do, and then there are very horrible things that could result from it that are unanticipated. That's pretty bad if you get hacked. And they steal your, they do identity theft. But if they're connected, if your brain is connected directly to the internet, then it will be real identity theft. They could take you. They could literally erase you. They could reprogram you in a way without you even knowing it. So you think you're in control of your own will, but it's actually somebody else.
It can literally stop your own thoughts from happening and replace them with other thoughts by sending thoughts to your head. And it's so sophisticated that you cannot tell where these thoughts are coming from. There's no way to discern that they're coming from somewhere other than your own mind. So you can imagine how bad this would be for people that don't even realize this technology exists, and they're having these thoughts which they think are spontaneous. I am just amazed at the way it works, and I would have no idea that anyone was influencing my thoughts at all. And that's exactly what it can be used for. It can be used to sway people in terms of their opinion, to make them go along with a certain agenda. It can be used to turn groups of people or individuals against each other for whatever purpose.
And who do we trust with this technology? Well, apparently not Mark Zuckerberg. He didn't do that good a job at protecting our data. You know, do we trust a government?
I wish I could be so gleeful like he is, just laughing about it all. I mean, I don't do these shows to depress you guys, but, you know, if we're going to be grown-ups, we need to know what is actually happening. We've got the 5G towers going up. We've got all these trying to convince us that every damn 3 months to get boosters. We've got Bill Gates, who's wanting to block the sun and also saying this will be the decade of vaccines. And then we've got Policy Horizons report in Canada, and other military and other countries have the same equivalent reports, saying we're going to put sensors on absolutely everything, food, etc. And they have admitted that they are doing geoengineering where stuff's going to fall from the sky. I covered that with James Scott. Sensors are going to go all over everything. They're admitting it and how great this is. And it's great for nature. And we can understand nature more. We're nature. We're the nature they want to understand. And they said they want to make synthetic everything. How are they doing that? How is it they're doing that? Well, Dr. Duncan said he's not allowed to say all the ways they're doing it.
Do we trust Donald Trump? Do we trust? Who do we trust? Yeah, decentralized, a blockchain, right? You're going to have technology that protects us. Technology which really doesn't exist today, and it has to be so foolproof, and we have to have so much faith in it that we're willing to open up our brains to that potential of being hacked.
People are not willing. That's why they're doing this without our permission. And the tops of our government and military know this. It's a race. China's already starting to do it. Russia's doing it. So North America is like, holy shit, we're going to get absolutely annihilated if we don't keep up with this tech. They have mind control for entire cities so that people say, yes, let's go to war, or yes, let's lock down, or yes, let's fight climate change, even though we know that the actual carbon dioxide issue, they've already proven, scientists have shown that humans are only like 0.00 something % of the entire problem of warming and of carbon dioxide. But they can't bring in everything they need to do without excuses, because we will not say yes to this.
You know, our future could go two ways, right? We could literally create heaven on earth. So we are all one giant being, and we are all working in unison, and we are experiencing these amazing things. Or it could be hell, where there's some evil AI or evil people controlling everything we do, and we're more like zombies, you know, where we don't even know it. Like, we think we're free and we're not actually free.
One of the things I'm concerned about is the technology as it's being researched and developed in Seattle utilizes emotion manipulation and behavior manipulation. This use of the technology can be done very covertly to the point where the person it's being used against will not know that this technology is being used against them. And that is one of my main concerns and one of the reasons why I want to bring more light to this technology and to this issue, because this technology could potentially be being used against tens to hundreds of millions of Americans every day. Create a general field of frequency in a geographical area so that everybody that within that geographical area is feeling the effects of the technology. It's more of a general application of the technology instead of an individual specific application of the technology.
It's going to be very hard to stop. It is going to be very hard to stop. Think about it. You know, it's sort of a one-way path. I've never seen humanity roll back technology. What we can do is control it. We need to start talking about this now.
And I'm here to tell you that it's already here. There isn't going to come a day where there's troops in the streets and tanks rolling down your neighborhood and riot gear and all this stuff. We might have isolated incidents like that. It might get like that every once in a while, but the true control grid is this technology, voice-to-skull, hive mind, behavior manipulation technology, and it can all be done remotely. It can be done simply by targeting you with the frequency, locking into the resonant frequency of your DNA and your mind, and in that manner completely track and trace and control you 24 hours a day. And it's highly, highly valuable for intelligence purposes and military purposes, corporate espionage purposes. And it is amazing the extent to which this technology works. It's so far advanced beyond what most people are aware of. It's truly mind-blowing. And I think that's a big part of educating people, is making them understand that, you know, fortunately or unfortunately, this is possible and it is being done right now today.
Anyway, when I got recruited, headhunted by DARPA, Department of Defense, CIA, and I love high-end technology, and I wasn't immoral about it. I wrote the code to track the artificial intelligence code to track the Soviet nuclear submarine fleet. That was a big project for the Navy. Worked on robotic surgery for medicine for the Army. Voice recognition, conversation planning for chatterbots. You use them all the time now. Voice of God weapons we used in war, in the Gulf War, for example.
This is a V2K.
V2K, where we can project a sound you cannot plug your ears for to stop. And we'll get into a little more about how that particular technology works. But we told them in their language, this is all a lay down your arms. And it worked quite effectively because the technology is unexplainable to the common person who hasn't experienced it yet. And then I saw in society a lot of my work being misused on my own population. I'm like, that's exactly what I worked on, the things Craig's experiencing. And this was not supposed to be used on civilians. This was supposed to be a wartime weapon, used for interrogation purposes, perhaps, to maybe fatigue the enemy and demoralize them, which you can understand the Department of Defense would be quite interested in this. Wars without blood. I know it's wonderful. Being misused completely. I started my own investigation about 22 years ago. I became a human rights activist against torture, all forms of torture, but mainly this kind of torture that Craig will talk about, what's happened to him and people all around the world. This wasn't the way it was supposed to be, and so my agenda since then has been to enlighten people, to educate them. I've gone to the Senate Intelligence Committee, met with 23 senators in the United States, federal, with the head of the LA FBI, and to our dismay, our words fell on deaf ears of what was happening. No one understood the technology or even believed it existed. And these are our leaders. We met with the Senate Intelligence Committee behind closed doors and, frisked for wires and bugs. They had never heard of MKUltra, which they're the oversight committee of our intelligence agencies. And we had a huge hearing in the 1970s called the Frank Church hearings, a senator from my state of Idaho, but I know most people don't know where Idaho is. And it was very famous, and turns out the CIA was doing all this mind control testing on humans in Canada and the United States, just on various things, and they end up shredding about 70,000 documents. This is happening. It's probably ramping up. If you know someone, educate them, because the shock and awe of becoming a target, not knowing how it all works and what to expect, is horrifying. And I kind of promised Craig I wouldn't get into how evil it is. So after World War II, the Russians the winners of the World War II and the United States, along with Britain and others, decided to divide all the German scientists and forgive them of their war crimes. And what we hear about are the ones that end up building, in NASA, or building intercontinental ballistic missiles, or the missile scientists. But half of them were mind scientists, and they were about psychological warfare of how to socially engineer the world under one world control. We don't hear about those, but they're very much in the, in the influence of every political party in the world.
Yeah, so I know there are numerous scientists who came over, instead of going to the Nuremberg trials and being hanged, the US government said, you tell us everything you know about mind control because you've been using children in the concentration camps. And the US received some of these scientists, and some went to Russia, and it's escalated from that
new
period.
Arms race began, and this is for the very soul of man, the cognitive warfare. Yeah, it's funny, we think nuclear weapons, that's what we need to worry about. And that we do. I mean, absolutely, that would annihilate all civilization. But you're one step ahead if you can control the minds of those with their fingers on the nuclear weapons. And so that's the idea, as well as you can shape cultures, not just through your normal propaganda methods of television, radio, et cetera. This is direct neural interfacing wirelessly while you're sleeping, programming your dreams, making associations that are not your self-autonomous entity. And this is a conversation human race has to have, every government has to have. And this is why I at least talk about it, is to get more people interested in it before it's too late. And it may be too late, but...
We know that the weapons were created for the Iraq War, as an example, to tell the Iraqi troops when they were retreating, you can basically talk into a microphone and that can radiate out to a couple of miles, 2 or 3 miles, and they use that to tell the Iraqi forces that this is the voice of Allah, put your weapons down.
There are two technologies. The voice of God is a broad categorization of both audio techniques, and one's called LRAD, long-range acoustical device, which again can go for a long distance. No speaker can do that. It's a type of acoustical array. And then there's the microwave hearing effect. Dr. Frey first invented it, and there's a Dr. Lin in the University of Chicago that has also done work on it. And this is a strange effect that if microwaves are high-frequency radio waves and interact with the brain, it heats it slightly, and then it cools, heats it slightly. And this is done in the extremely low frequency range, and humans can hear voices clicking, music can be piped into it with different levels of sensitivity, and it depends on the power range window. And that's one type of voice of God weapon. Often, the Army calls it B2K, voice to skull. They removed it from their website because of all the people that are complaining about it. And so that's one aspect. Then there's more sophisticated weaponry that we use brain prints. Everyone has a unique fingerprint, even more so. You have a unique thought pattern. And so we can cognitively model certain aspects, like a fingerprint, of your brain print, if we can get a sample of your MEG, which is called magnetoencephalograph, or your EG, electroencephalograph, reading your brain waves, the electricity and the magnetic radiance that it gives off. Now again, people have difficulty believing we've gone from brain chips, which they used to do in the 1960s with a guy named Dr. Delgado, and he's known as he was a Yale professor in the School of Medicine for neurology, and he would experiment with humans by inserting electrodes into their brain. He could create any type of emotion. He could move their bodies in certain ways. Very brutal, but that was allowed during the Cold War. He even inserted brain chips to do it remotely, just radio frequency brain chips. His most famous experiment was using a ball, and I don't know if he actually was in the ring with the ball, and he was the matador, but with the press of the button, as the ball charged, it suddenly stopped. And that really impressed, obviously, many people in government. How do you control humans? Can we use this for violent criminals, for example? And a whole plethora of opportunities arose, but the research remains dark. because we, moral people, would not accept it. Now, in one experiment when I was with DARPA, we were working on the Soldier 2000 project. We went into the Mass General Hospital and asked for patients with no family, with dementia, and we needed to experiment on them. But anytime you give money away or get it from the government, you have to have dual uses. So we said they might walk away, not know where they are. We want to track them. Now that was the cover story. We were really looking at a full body land of all vital signs for soldiers in the future. Well, that was in 2000. Obviously, we've progressed quite a bit since then. And they gave it to us. Just human beings being trafficked.
There's been such an incredible history of what the United States has done in terms of experimentation.
And this is just what they were caught doing. There was a Dr. Ewan Cameron, head of the World Psychiatry Community, and he had CIA funding. He took housewives that had mild depression, played 2-track loop tapes, gave them drugs, LSD, I believe, and the 2-track tapes were very negative. Your family hates you, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to get into the details. It's very awful and evil. And their personalities would be erased in a couple weeks. One woman sued. She got money, and she had to learn how to talk and pee again. So that's literally brainwashing. You're de-patterning the brain's cultural background, everything it's learned. Then the second half comes in, and that's programming. And then you build up new personalities. The CIA does this for split personality assassins, but it's for splitting personalities. It's also used in a variety of interrogation techniques for high-value targets. So yes, there's a long history of experimenting on the vulnerable people. Usually people can be discredited. We would feed Down syndrome children radioactive cereal, for example, to see how frequently cancers would arise. The medical industry itself is such an authority that they can be paid under the table. By usually the CIA, but in my case it was Department of Defense. And they just say national security, that's the buzzword.
In the case of radiation testing, during the Cold War, people would go into hospital just for basic surgery, put under anesthetic, come out with burns on their bodies. And that was part of the process of what was done to people non-consensually. You went in there for basic surgery, and they came out with burns on their bodies, and there was an 18-month investigation into it. And there's a wonderful YouTube video where President Clinton stands up in October 1995, and he basically says, on behalf of the US government, we need to step up and apologise that this is what we've done to people. So when you look at the history, it's overwhelming. Plutonium injection, syphilis, LSD. They injected black women to make them barren. They decided if you were poor or homeless, they could inject you with something as a test subject.
And you can imagine how useful that would be to manipulate politicians or news broadcasters, is inserting words in their speeches or screwing up their speech, depending on who you want to win and manipulate.
Or being in a meeting and transmitting what you are watching and listening to some.
And that's the spy application.
That's the spy application of it.
And you have no metal necessarily on you, but you're giving off biosignatures, which can be deciphered.
Correct.
And it's the ultimate weapon.
So a doctor will refer you to a neurologist. You go in because this is not well known or it's being protected, this information. You have a neurologist and a radiologist who looks at the chart very quickly. They're not looking for specific implants or chips. Some of them are so small, they're not all made of metal, so MRIs and CAT scans, X-rays don't pick these up. And so you have what's called calcification, and that happens to the bone grows over the skull, and I just spoke to a neurologist recently, and the neurologist said, yes, we don't go into those areas that we're not looking for a tumour. They're called LFOs, light foreign objects.
As we found out during the Gulf War, or Desert Storm, we tortured a few people, as Clinton said. We do things that the public can't know about because they would feel too much shame that their tax dollars were being used in such a way. They would lose their funding potentially. But there are other ways other than chipping. There are about 26 other ways, and all are being explored. That's why they need so many humans to do this survey, if you will.
26 ways, and all are being explored. Vaccines, geoengineering, 5G, direct energy weapons. They get into direct energy weapons. 26 ways, and they're all being explored.
And so one such example is nanoprotein, magnetic nanoproteins. Now, how they're delivered to the individual, there's a variety of mechanisms that can do that, but they permanently attach to the nerve cells and brain cells, and hence just a magnetic field that is biosynchronized, biocorrelated to your brain pan will only affect you, not the person next to you. So you have been turned into a cell phone, in a sense. Havana syndrome is something new. Why would the CIA attack their own people? At an embassy in China, and there's an FBI agent who's recent in Florida suing the US government. He knows about it, and he's trying to stop it. Now, we can do that with acoustic weapons. We can do it with microwave weapons, often called directed energy weapons, DEWs. You'll hear that acronym used.
Look at that. Canadian government's not denying that they use them. You just have to look, people.
However, this is something different, and the U.S. government, their best agents, they're denying their claims. And why would they lie? It makes no sense. Because your career is over as soon as you admit you have an illness of some sort, something going on with your brain. And so, I probably shouldn't say this on camera, but I think it's a false flag technique. Operation Northwoods, it was top secret and then got released, that we were going to attack American citizens and military bases within the U.S. and blame it on Cuba as a reason to invade them. And that's called Havana syndrome. It's like, are they playing?
And like I said before, Dr. Duncan was found dead. According to the internet, he is no longer with us as of this past summer.
The same game again, trying to blame it on Russia or whoever behind it. So I'm very skeptical about it. And Havana syndrome is just a small subset of this much broader picture.
Yeah, we just absolutely overwhelmed at ICATOR from people contacting us, and Robert also, through the work that we do on the media, I can't keep up with the number of people who are contacting us.
The CIA uses scripts, and they have names, but they're basically to cause confusion, panic, fear. That's the basis of de-patterning a person before you reprogram them.
Did you hear that? Panic, fear before you reprogram them. With COVID, panic, fear, shutting everything down. Do you remember how new normal, every single station, this is the new normal, this is the new normal, this is the new normal. Be kind to your neighbor, be kind, be safe, stay safe, stay safe, stay safe, stay safe. Norb, my husband, he doesn't really like NLP, but he did get trained in NLP long time ago when he was a sales guy in his 20s. And he's like, this is serious NLP happening here. Neuro-linguistics programming, where it doesn't matter if you look at the statistics and go, well, I don't understand this. What do you mean the flu just disappeared in Canada that year? The flu just disappeared? Everything's COVID? And then when COVID sort of ended, all of a sudden the flu's back? I don't get it. People were going in and showing that many hospitals were empty, but they didn't want to know. They didn't want to look because the news said panic and disorder, boosters, 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 boosters. Oh, we thought it was 1 dose. Oh, no, it's 2 doses. Oh, we thought it was 2 doses and back to normal. Oh, no, boosters, 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 because CBC says so. They're breaking us down through this COVID cult. And families have been turned against each other. It's not hard to do this. They don't even need to go this far, but they'll use this if they have to.
Typically, when you're creating a programmed assassin or a spy or a psychobomb, we have a lot of shootings in the U.S. and many of them hear voices, and that's a social engineering technique possibly to take away gun rights. You can make a person believe they hear a specific voice, and that's voice morphing, something I worked on. And you only need a small sample of anyone on a telephone. The NSA collects it all, so all your voices have samples. And they can throw your family, dead relatives' voices if they already have a sample from the past that's been collected. That can all be another form of manipulation of leaders. And so this is it's a very devastating technology in terms of democracy, religion. There's no free will. Well, then how does that survive? And even crime and punishment. If you don't know whose mind is actually manipulating that person into violence or criminal activity, there is no justice, because you're linking a body, not the person's autonomy and free will.
iLabs. And iLabs looks at there's a lot of brain research there, and we saw the transmission of thoughts from a child onto a screen. So the child literally was given the names of animals, and the child would project it up onto a screen. So there's some really positive parts to this. Not that I enjoyed watching a child being used for this demonstration, but there's some really positive parts to this, where you have people who have Parkinson's now can literally look at a screen. They have very, very thin wires which are put into their brain, and they can literally type through their thoughts an email and have it sent to somebody.
This is very possibly the future. And people are going to say, no, I would never do that. I bet people will line up if it's the only way they can compete at work, insert a new language or increase their intelligence. People say they'll never get implants. Well, you lose your wallet.
Policy Horizons Report Canada talks about that as well. I don't know if they did in the 2024 one, but the one I showed before, where they're trying to figure out, ethics, where certain jobs will just expect you to have this now. And you'll want to do it for your job. But the problem is it can be used for such nefarious reasons. And we're seeing that these people have no ethics. They are targeting people and testing this on them. And these people just think they're crazy and they're in institutions. I mean, it's pretty dark. We need to get on our knees and start to pray. We need to start to pray. That's all I can say. It's important.
Or your medical records, it's all implanted. People are going to do it.
And it's in a variety of languages. So we have a very good friend in the United States who lives just outside Chicago, who is also on panels talking about this, Dr. Len Baer, and he's been diagnosed with this, and the voices which come into his head are all in Russian.
In Russian, and they use his family members' voices for the derogatory remarks.
And he's been recognised by the US government as having this, which is so fantastic. I wanted to talk about the acronyms we talked about earlier. One is TAMI, one is MIND, and one is Satan.
And these are all subsystems and evolutions of mind control technologies. But I'm going to start back even further. There's one called REHIT. It stands for Remote Hypnotic Inter or Intra-Cerebral Control. And what that means is at a distance, and this is an old CIA technology, at a distance we can control thoughts, behaviors, moods, and the cerebral part obviously uses the highest level form of our identity, our ego, our processing power. That integrates all the other parts of our brain. And, I think that says it all, but then some of these other acronyms are systems that we developed. MIND is magnetically integrated neuron duplicator. So we can actually duplicate virtual neurons into a person, as well as clone that personality into a supercomputer. I mean, it gets really scientific or science fiction-y, but it's not. And it's not 100% fidelity by any means. We're a long ways from that. But a lot of the rich people are investing in this technology because they don't want to die. They got a lot of money. They don't want to die. So it's kind of silicon immortality is what they're going for. They won't achieve it because it's impossible to get 100% accuracy of a human mind.
So we can just recognise there is so much evil in the world, as we know. We don't only have dictatorships, but we have people who are sponsoring this as well continually. So I will keep fighting this. The reason we talk about it.
Right.
Yeah,
it's worth a lot of money. And, but as Oppenheimer, who kind of was the father of the atomic bomb, was he evil, or did he save lives? Or, you know, there's a moral gray area, and a lot of people can't see the bigger picture, and they're trapped. You know, I'm partially trapped by national security oaths and whatnot that I can talk about. And you were asking about two more acronyms. Why don't we go back?
Yes, TAMI
and
Satan.
Thought, amplification, and mind interface. And it's a way to probe someone back to their childhood, for example, to make them recall memories. Let's say they're a terrorist. You can make them give out their network of who they meet and that kind of thing. And then Satan, that's the evil part of it. You know, CIA is quite known for assassinating leaders they don't like and people. That stands for silent assassination through adaptive networks. Now that can be neural networks, like what your brain is made of, through dysfunction, or it can be social networks, it includes that, making the person isolated and throwing their voices and making them believe all their family and friends are against them. And so the hypnosis, the remote hypnosis, rehab, works better if a person is isolated than has a good support group. And other networks are, you can imagine, we're all networked in some way. It can be social networks that can break in, spoof you on Facebook or something like that. And it's about destroying the person from every direction they can. And no one's going to believe them. What, whole government's out to get you? Who are you? Why would they do that? And those are the typical questions. They do it because they have to get the data or they want to use you. And it's probably because you are nobody. That's the reason they do that. In any study, they need a sample of all languages, all cultures, all people to make sure the weapon works on everything.
So we do this because we want to share the information so that you can then go on and share it with people as well. That's what we ask for
right.
from
And then
today.
there'll be more pressure, and the politicians will have to not play dumb anymore, and the newspapers and mass media can't hide it with all this counterintelligence that goes on. I haven't watched television in probably 7 years because I see through it all. And I just don't like the propaganda and the lies they tell the public.
Melanie Britschan, who is the president of ICATOR. So it stands for ICATOR, International Coalition Against the Torture and Robotization of All Living Beings.
And there are many of these groups that have sprung up all over the world. And then who do you give the evidence to? Go to your congressman? They'll just shrug their shoulders. Go to a judge? They don't know anything about this.
Just like when people go to their MLA or the MP about the geoengineering going on above us that we can see, and they're like, oh, I emailed this person above me, and they say no one knows anything about it. It's not happening. Because they don't know about it. Because this is literally like DARPA military operations. It's way above even Trudeau's pay grade. I mean, he probably knows about some of this stuff, and he's a sociopath and doesn't care, but the politicians are only here for 4 years, maybe 8. These guys, it's lifelong CIA, DARPA, military.
And grandchildren, future generations, are going to suffer from this. We already see children walking around on their phones all the time. There's no communication. So that's what we need to do. We need to be able to share this information for future generations to stop this. I call these people CATS, C-A-T-S, cowards, actors, and traitors. And one day, their 9 lives will run out.
And the end goal?
Oh, and the end goal is total control. Total control.
Why?
So we can all live in utopia forever after and not know we're being controlled.
And then it's
to prevent war, nuclear war, biological war. People can't even think of evil. You get like a little Skinner shock in a box, you know. Oh, I shouldn't steal. Okay, well, everyone will act perfectly.
We're taking this to Parliament in Brussels. Very shortly, we have the physicist, British physicist, Dr. Barry Trower, who created the mind control platform for
he did electronic warfare, signal intelligence for the British Navy. Very wise man, and he's willing to speak. Maybe he's passed the terms of his agreement.
Yeah, so he's coming over to help us out to go before Parliament.
He's going to get to where somebody asks a question soon, and they say, if you're whistleblowing all this stuff, how is it that you're like alive still? And he says, well, I was threatened by this one group. You're going to hear which one it was. And he says, I don't fear death. Well, he's dead now.
And when you think about experiments, normally experiments come with research. Research comes with monitoring. To what aim is there randomly being able to affect you and torture you without identifying the research of what's happening? Are we winning? Have we achieved anything?
Okay, I can answer that. The system works off of stress levels. So think of it as a remote lie detector test. But if you don't care and you're proud of it, it will move on to the next script.
But how do they monitor the outcome of their research?
They're reading it in real time.
So they get a retransmission?
Yes.
That's a sneaky part.
That's a sneaky part. And when the CIA was doing the LSD experiments in the Congress during the church hearings, asked them, why are you dosing people with LSD and then not following up the long-term effects or anything else? They were following up with the long-term effects, but they can't tell Congress. They don't even have the security clearance. We have an overt government in the United States, the ones that people vote for, and then we have the secret government. And the secret government's becoming more powerful every day. We broke that horse, we broke that human. And we won, now we can reprogram or do whatever we want.
You've done a lot of work with CIA, and you have a lot of information about all this stuff. How come they haven't assassinated you?
Yeah, I knew that question would come up. I was warned by a guy from Israeli Secret Service or Mossad not to come to your country because if I left the United States, I'd be assassinated. I don't fear death. I'm doing the right thing. This is a great purpose for my life. It's to save others' lives. And I get probably an email a day, a thank you note for saving someone's life by the information that I give out. I just can't live my life in fear. I'm going to do what I do. Could they kill me? Yes, of course, I don't hide. But I also have become too much of a figure that would probably lead to a lot of questions.
Are you limited, Robert, with what you can say?
To some extent. I can tell you how we create UFOs, for example, with directed energy weapons, the orbs in the sky. But I can't talk about certain signal intelligence, advanced sensors and systems.
So that's a whole nother topic. We've talked about this before amongst all of us. Are UFOs real, or are they just a sort of directed energy weapons sort of tech he's talking about? I'm not technical. And I had to whittle this interview down. It was so long. Guys, I took this might seem like a long show. I might even do part 1 and 2 on Rumble, etc., because it's getting to be a long show. But he was saying that a lot of the things that fighter pilots and Navy are seeing in the skies and reporting, it's actually DARPA and the military and the CIA testing out holograms and testing out this so that when they want us to think we're being invaded by UFOs or we're being, brought into UFOs and experimented on, he was saying a lot of this is actual mind control, holograms. So I'm not saying UFOs aren't real. Some people get mad at me for saying this. I think maybe some of them are. I don't know. But that they've taken this and now he's saying that fighter pilots, they actually do think they're seeing it. And same with regular pilots or just people on the ground. But that orbs and the cigar-shaped things that people are seeing in the sky and all that, that they can create those now. And so they can get everybody going and ready for this big disclosure where they can say, we have to do this to the planet because the aliens have told us that our planet's going to die in 100 years if we don't do this, 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 and this. We have to listen to them. I mean, they can do anything with this mind control now. And it's funny how at the tail end of the whole COVID propaganda, they started going on, disclosing on Fox, disclosing on CNN. Oh, look at these fighter jets a long time ago. Look what they saw. Oh, we're just disclosing it now because the government says we can. Ha ha ha. This is a whole nother show. We've talked about UFOs and aliens before. I don't know what to tell you, but he's saying they can create all of that where we are actually seeing it. And he said, and radars will pick it up as well. So, you know, the low-level guys sitting in doing the radar will say, no, there's something there. It's real. Or, oh, our radar didn't detect it. Must be some crazy tech. I mean, that's just a whole nother conversation.
Usually through a war, there's an application that's developed to maintain a peace or to prevent an attack. And usually you can kind of see like technological or medical advances during the time of a war that then have a civilian application afterwards. And when you're talking about like ILAD, going, if I'm pronounced it correctly, you know, my 98-and-a-half-year-old grandmother died about a year ago. And I kind of always just think, wouldn't it be great if you could download her brain and her life and experience into the cloud or into a thumb drive, you know, her parents and her parents, so you wouldn't be mucking around with genealogy.com, or you could actually still hear the stories in that way. Would there be positive applications?
Yes.
Well, even saying, okay, you know, this is the voice of God, this is Allah, lay down your weapons. You could say during the pandemic, keep calm, don't worry about it so much, and that sort of thing.
So what if everybody had their own personal Jesus in their head that said very positive things, but not distracting, would guide you? You're lost, and you can connect wirelessly to the internet anywhere. Oh, you want to make a left here if you want to get there. So like a personal assistant. And then you mentioned grandparents, dead relatives. Microsoft and other companies are already doing that. Not downloading the brain. What they're doing is using Markov modeling of speech, of how, and with the voice morphing, of how they sound and the phrases they use. And it gives you a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling they're still around.
We need to stop this. Future generations are going to suffer otherwise. And so we will keep fighting and doing our best. So thank you, my dear friend.
No,
thank you so much.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're on Twitter, you got to see the whole thing. If you didn't see the whole thing, please rewind, go back to the beginning, watch the whole thing, watch it in 2 or 3 parts if you need to. I'm going to be back with Dr. Stephen Pellick. He was supposed to come on a week ago, but I actually came down with a very bad sickness. That's why you haven't seen me in a week. And I almost went on antibiotics, but I didn't want to. I was on HCQ and ivermectin. I'm not telling you that you should, but whatever sickness this was, I got through it with HCQ, ivermectin, zinc, vitamin C, vitamin D. Normally, I would have needed to go on antibiotics. I held through. I didn't, and I'm okay. I'm not saying use it, but if you want this in your war chest for this upcoming flu season, in the description is a place that I order mine from. If you liked this episode and you want to help out, I worked very hard on it. If you'd like to buy me a coffee for this episode, there's a way to do that in the description because I do work very hard to bring the truth to Canadians. Have a great day. Thank you so much for tuning in. What is the body's most important nutrient? By volume, the average body is 62% hydrogen, 24% oxygen, 12% carbon, and only 2% everything else. Health science is concentrated on minerals and vitamins, but those are part of only the 2%. When considering proteins and carbs, they miss the importance of hydrogen, how we normally get it, and its role in the body. Hydrogen is the building block of life, and it's involved in virtually every chemical process in the body. Without sufficient hydrogen, the body starts shutting down systems that aren't immediately life-threatening to preserve hydrogen and life. First, the regeneration system shut down, you age quicker and heal slowly. Then, the immune system shut down, you get sick easier. And finally, organs start to fail. Science is proving that chronic lack of hydrogen causes or exacerbates nearly every ailment known to man. How do we normally get our hydrogen? What is the best way to get hydrogen into your body? What is Brown's gas? Learn more at aquacure.life. That's aquacure.life. And if you do decide to buy the Aquacure AC50, put Liberty spelled normally in the discount code box for 5% off the retail price, and it's a 1-year money-back guarantee. Norb and I absolutely love ours.